if you're teaching a student, and this is what I'm hoping that you as a teacher, as a performer could do, if you're a student, you probably won't be able to come up with things so easily, right? And so that's your job as the teacher, to help your student get all of these details, to write down the specifics. What key do you like? I like the key of E flat major. Let's write that under a harmony section. I listened to a contemporary pop piece that went from the 1 chord to the 5 chord. In the B section, it went to the 5 chord, right? And so you took notes on the things that you liked. If the student can easily recognize what they like, but sometimes they just don't know what to call it. So that's your job to kind of help them with that, right?
Hey teachers, it's Tim here again, and welcome back to another episode of the Topcast. This is episode number 209. And for today's show notes and some really cool downloads, which I'll talk to you about in just a moment, just head to topmusic.co/episode 209. Now, my guest today is going to be outlining a 5-step compositional process that you can use in your studio with your students. And what I'd recommend is that you try it out yourself first. And you'll actually, in this episode, get to hear Chris running me through this process live. I've got a piano with me and I'm actually trying out his process. And we managed to make 2 compositions. He creates one using the template and it's completely different to the one that I create. And what we've done is we've put together his step-by-step process, a cheat sheet or a checklist for that, and also information about the music that we've created. So you can actually have a look at it, play through it, and have a listen as well. So all of that is coming up. Now, if you'd like to grab those downloads, then head to topmusic.co/episode 209. And you can actually walk through this with us. So go and grab that, print out the checklist. You can fill out the sections as we talk through it. It's really a great episode. Unlike other ones where you might be driving in the car or something like that, I'd actually encourage you, if not the first time you listen to this, then the second time, to be at the piano and ready to try and compose yourself. The great thing about this is that it's a simple process that he walks through really clearly. You can try it yourself, and then if it works for you, try it out with some of your students. I think you're going to have huge success with this. So once again, if you'd like the transcript and the freebie for today's episode, which is Chris's template and the recordings of the music that we've created, then head to topmusic.co/episode 209. So let me tell you about Christopher now before we get started. Christopher Oill is an exclusive composer for FJH Music Company, a proud owner of the Oill Piano Studio and a concert pianist. In all of his teaching, performing and composing, he pushes the limits of innovation and creativity, keeping the world of piano pedagogy fresh, inviting and exciting. So welcome to the show, or welcome back to the show, Christopher Oill.
Thanks, Tim, for having me. Excited to be here.
Absolute pleasure. It is the second time, so I'm sure quite a few people will have heard you on the first episode where actually we did a reversal. You interviewed me, which was kind of fun.
Mm-hmm.
But give people a quick reminder about yourself, what you're up to, and your studio.
Right. So, I've been playing piano and composing since I was about 10 years old. Got some formal education in music education and piano performance. And now I worked my way around the United States. Now I'm in Tempe. I own a piano studio and I'm an exclusive composer for the FJH Music Company Incorporated. I also do some work for the Faber Piano Adventures.
Ah, super. And we'll talk a little bit at the end about some of the work that you've got out with FJH quite recently that you've released too.
Mm-hmm.
But today's episode, again, you love sort of challenging me to doing some new things. So today we're going to run things a little bit like a workshop, because you've given what we're going to be covering today, you've given as a workshop at conferences. But of course, now that lots of us are in lockdown, conferences aren't happening, but we're going to do something a little bit different. So what topic are we unpacking and how's this going to work?
Right. So today we're going to talk about 5-step compositional process that I devised. And the reason I kind of came up with it was because, it started before I was teaching it. I always got asked this question, and I heard this question got asked a lot to other composers. What's your compositional process? And it's something I couldn't really quite answer because I just compose in so many different styles and so many different genres. And I had so many different ideas where the process seemed to be so inconsistent. And so when I started teaching, though, I had somewhat of a change of heart on that topic, you could say, because if I didn't explain it really clearly every time, then the student would be really confused and might give up on composing entirely. So I wanted to come up with a process that was general enough to encompass all of my students' various interests, but specific enough to bring them from the beginning of their piece to the end of their piece.
One of the challenges, of course, with anyone that's highly skilled at what they do is teaching it in a step-by-step scaffolded framework. And so I totally understand that feeling that you've had, and it's going to be great to go through that with you. Will this work for online lessons, given so many people are still remote teaching?
Oh, yeah, of course. In fact, since this pandemic, I've been teaching almost all of my lessons online, and I do composing with almost all of my students. And so, yeah, that's kind of my big answer there is absolutely.
Fantastic. I think we should just get straight into it now, pretty much. So, well, I'm in your hands, Christopher. Let me know what to do, how it works. And I think, would it be a good idea for teachers, if they want to do this, that they could actually listen to this at the piano and stop, start, and try things out themselves? Is that the goal?
Yeah, absolutely. That would be a great idea. If you are listening to this, then go ahead and sit at the piano, maybe get a notebook out. That might be pretty important. And then it might help to have some internet access in case, well, you'll see.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to be your guinea pig. I'm going to hand over to you and let you go for it. Take it away.
Awesome. So, before I actually dive into each of the steps of the process a little bit more in detail, I think it might be a good idea to get the overall view of the process to see how it works from beginning to end. So, the first step is I give each step a name. I think it's easier to remember that way. So, the first step is to think. And this is the step where you're going to be brainstorming the purpose of the piece that you wish to create. And the next step is going to be step two, outline, where we decide the form of the piece. So, kind of generally what the sections are going to look like from beginning to end. The third step is going to be research. And this is where we're going to do some listening to music, and we're going to take some notes on what we like about those pieces as it relates to our first idea. But I'll say that that step, we can kind of do a lot of that work in our head sometimes. And so then we're going to experiment with those notes and come up with some sounds in this step. Then the fourth step is to sketch. And in the fourth step in sketch, this is where we improvise through the whole piece. And I know improvisation can be a pretty scary word to some people, but if you've done all the other steps pretty well up until this point, it won't be too hard because it's kind of like you're setting the rules for yourself. And so the last step is step 5, which is to shape. And so once you've got a real rough idea of the piece from beginning to end with your sketch, you can take it to the next step and fine tune those ideas and edit the details and get it to be exactly what you want. And then you can even add on to it. And so now let's go back to the step 1, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in detail. So the first step is, like I said, to think. And in this case, you'd think that that step would be obvious.
Not necessarily.
But that's what I was saying. Yeah, exactly. And so you'd think it would be obvious, but most composers, including myself, when we go to compose at the piano, we just like to ramble. We just like to sit down and play.
That's always been my assumption about composers. You just sit down and you might pick a key and you will start doodling around, right?
Right, but then doodling can turn into endless composing. And so I've had a lot of students who started off with that and they could never finish their piece because they never really thought about what they wanted it to be.
That is a big challenge. So I'm actually really glad you brought this. Sorry to interrupt you. Really glad you brought this up as a first thing, because I personally will muck around a bit, but never come up with anything. And my students, because I tend to do that, I do have that trouble with my students. We come up with cool chord progressions and melodies and things like that, but to create a finished work is a challenge.
Right. Exactly. And so when you start to when you sit back, and this is the same for when you're practicing a piano piece too. A lot of the work you can do is in your head. There's some famous pianists who sat away from the piano for days practicing the piece in their head, right? Figuring out what they wanted to do before they actually touched the keys. Kind of a similar concept. So in this step, if you're teaching it in particular, you want to ask questions like, how do you want this piece to feel? What do you want this piece to be about? Do you want this piece to be in a particular style? Anything along these lines. And so I'll give you a couple examples. So if you're teaching a young kid, you ask them, hey, what do you want to write about? They might say, I don't know. Well, if they say, I don't know, then it's pretty easy to solve that solution. You say, well, what was your day about? Well, I saw a bunny in my backyard today. Oh, cool. We could write a piece about a bunny, right?
Mm-hmm.
We could write a piece about anything, really.
What sport did you play yesterday, or what did you do outside? Or
Exactly. Anything, right? And you want to go a little bit more into detail with that, though. So don't just stop at bunny, right? Say, oh, well, was the bunny really fast? Oh, where was the bunny coming from? Did it come from the backwoods? Did it hop in the pool? Did it eat your carrots? How big was the bunny? Those kind of, ask for details. Details are important because they're going to help us with the next parts of the story. You could even just write a piece about, it could be like a pop piece, right? You say, hey, I want to write a contemporary pop piece, and I want it to be in the style of Billie Eilish, and anything like this. So what I want to try right now with you, Tim, is I want to come up with our own idea. Now, for the sake of I did some thinking on this before the podcast, and I think that for the sake of your audience, I'd like to try and I don't think I want to put you too much on the spot here. So
thank you.
I'll give you a suggestion for what we can write.
Yep.
So like I said, I think a lot of listeners here are very interested in that contemporary, modern kind of style that if you've ever heard a lot of composers nowadays, like I would name some pedagogical composers for me. We've got Helen Marley, right?
Kevin Olsen, Dennis Alexander.
Yeah, Kevin Olsen, all of them. They're all fun, right? And a lot of them write this really wonderful sounding, beautiful contemporary style.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, would you agree with me that this is something that most of your listeners might be interested in trying out?
Yeah, I think so too. Particularly those that have, a lot of those pieces appeal to teenagers and adults as well, I think, where you've got those kind of flowing arpeggiated bass lines and things like that with, they're quite sonorous and rich and warm. I think that's a good style. Yeah.
And all of those words that you just used, it's awesome that you came up with those on the spot, because those were the details that I was looking.
Oh, awesome.
They were, hey, it's sonorous and warm and et cetera. Yeah. So it might be good to take out a notepad at this point and write down those words. So, and arpeggiated bass, right? So if you can remember some of those details that you just mentioned, that's going to come in handy later.
Mm-hmm.
So I think at this point, it would be nice to move on, now that we've got a clearer image, move on to step 2, which is the outline. And I like to think of this step as, I compare it to picking a canvas when you're painting. And so if you're a professional painter, you might make your own canvas, but if you're still learning, then you're probably going to go to the store, right? What, Michael's? I don't know if you have a Michael's there in Australia.
We don't, but I know the idea, your art store of some sort.
Yeah, that kind of thing. And you have just a couple of sizes to pick from, right? And so if you have that frame, it's much easier to put stuff on there. In music, there's forms that already exist. You don't have to come up with your own form. You could just pick one. And what I've kind of found is it doesn't really matter which form you pick, just pick any, get started. And I guess one thing that could matter is, how long do you want your piece to be, right? So if you want your piece to be long, you might pick something like sonata form, or you might pick something like
rondo.
Yeah, exactly. And so if you want to pick something that's short, you might just go with a simple ABA, big section kind of style. Or if you want something that's even shorter, you can create a 1-section piece and just focus on the order of the phrasing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we could have just a little A phrase, little A phrase, little B phrase, little A phrase, or we can go AB, AB, we can go AA, AB. I guess that would kind of dive into a little bit of a bigger form, right? But long story short, just pick one and go with it.
Right.
And
I'm
so,
thinking as well of verse-chorus form. Even if you're not writing a song, you can use that kind of
mhm,
verse-chorus, bridge, chorus kind of thing, I
right.
guess. A, B, C, B.
Yeah, and you know
C,
what?
A.
In a contemporary pop style, that might actually be a good choice. I actually was thinking about that the other day. Do you realize do you notice how similar song form is to sonata form? It's eerie. We've got A, B, A, B.
Yeah, to be honest, I haven't actually.
Well, the simple song form.
Because you call them first theme and second themes and all that stuff, don't you? Developments,
Right.
recapitulations,
On the big scale, we kind of got A, B, development, and then the
like the
return of
bridge.
the
Yeah.
main theme. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Verse, chorus, bridge, chorus. I thought that was kind of a neat memory, I guess. Okay, yeah. So I was thinking, like we said, we want to write something that we can do for our, right? We're going to write something that's somewhat in a beautiful contemporary kind of style with all the things that you outlined. But for the sake of today's, I want to try and get as much written as possible today as we can. And so we'll probably want to stick to one of the option that I mentioned before, which is kind of just a one section piece with like just focusing on the order of the phrases. And
Okay.
so I'll give you some choices. You ready? Do you want to do A, B, A, B? Do you want to do A, B, B? Or do you want to do,
Oh, I like the first one. Let's go A, B, A, B.
okay, let's do A, B, A, B. Excellent.
I'm writing it down.
Mm-hmm. And excellent. And I would suggest everyone else to write down the form that they pick at home too. And at this point, you might also even go into those A, B, A, B and see how it can relate to your original idea. So in the A section, let's be a little bit more specific about what we want to happen in that section. So I'll ask you some questions about it, right? In the A section, do you want to start off a little bit more? Well, do you have any ideas about how you would want to start off? Let me phrase it like that. Just general, vague.
Yeah, I'm thinking perhaps slower and more mellow in the A section, and perhaps
Excellent.
a bit more action in the B section.
I love it. And then if we just stuck to really true to A, B, we could literally just do that over and over again. Probably what's going to happen is in order to end the piece on that second B section, we'll probably have to do something like B prime, right? And alter it a little bit. So how do you think we're going to alter it on a very subtle level? So you said a little bit more action on that B section, right? Maybe on the B prime section, how are we going to curve that thought just a little bit?
I guess we take some action out. So we simplify it a bit, slow it down, make it more like the A somehow, or bring it back to the key of the A if we're changing. Am I on the right track here?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I think key changes might be, because we're creating a real short piece, key changes might be a little out of the question.
Okay.
Unless, well, I mean, not too out of the question. I guess you could, if you want, you could do it in a really small piece, but we'll see when we get there, right? Okay, good. So we write down the sections of our form. Now we have to move on to step 3, which is research. And like I said before, you kind of can do a lot of this in your head, but if you feel like you're getting stuck and you can't really come up with the right answers to this, then you have the internet available to you. You have YouTube available to you where you can listen to other pieces that sound like your idea. I'll let you in on a little secret that a lot of composers don't like to admit, which is compositions, they aren't really original. And so you don't have to feel the pressure of doing something original. Really, what compositions are, if they sound original, they're just a combination of smaller elements from a variety of pieces that you've listened to over the course of your life.
We finally launched the Top Music Marketplace. This has been a project of mine it's been in my head for about 3 years and a whole lot of hard work for the last 6 months. And I must say, I'm so thankful to our 64 current sellers for all the work that they've done to upload all their products. We've got over 540 products now for sale at the Top Music Marketplace. And as a podcast listener, if you haven't yet used your 10% discount for your first purchase, then, well, what are you waiting for? Go and grab something cool. All you need to do is head to topmusicmarketplace.com and use the code PODLAUNCH10. That's POD launch, LAUNCH 10, PODLAUNCH 10, and go and have a look at all the great things that we've got going over there. It's been so popular and everyone's so excited. I can't wait to share it with you.
Now, here's what I mean by elements. So here's what I want you to do with your outline. Underneath each of the sections of your outline, I want you to write 6 of the 7 musical elements, and then give a little space after each element to take some notes. Reminder, these 6 elements are melody, harmony, rhythm, dynamics, texture, and timbre. And of course, that 7th element is form, but we kind of already talked about form.
Right. Okay. And timbre, for people that might not know what that is, and that's spelled Timbre.
Yeah.
Right?
So that's actually a real good question, because on piano, the timbre has kind of 2 meanings to me. It has somewhat of an abstract meaning, and it also has a little bit more of a physical meaning. When it comes to the physical timbre on piano, it's usually to do a little bit more with the pedal and how you're using the pedal. And then when it comes to a little bit more of an abstract thing, timbre is the sound of the instrument, right? That's kind of generally what timbre is. So when it comes to timbre, personally, I like to think of timbre as sort of thinking about the different instruments of the orchestra. And I imagine when I write it on the piano, so if I do something like this, right? What instrument comes into your head?
Like a flute, perhaps?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
A flute. I had a piccolo, but that's really close.
Yeah. Good.
So that's kind of like the idea of timbre. And actually, you know what? If you're listening and you're trying to imitate a pop song or something like that, you can translate that as, well, in this pop song, I heard the bass guitar do this. That's more like funk, right?
Yeah.
But anyways, so that's my idea about timbre. You can kind of interpret it as you wish, though.
Yeah, I mean, easier on something like a violin or a trumpet where you can mute the sound or pluck the strings versus bow them and those kinds of things. I mean, that's a more obvious difference in sound, whereas we're a little bit more limited until we start pulling apart pianos, I guess.
Right. And, I would say for all of these elements, I'm kind of purposefully not describing them a little bit more in detail, because I think that a lot of people understand these elements a little bit differently, and that's okay. The bigger idea here is to take specific notes on what you want to hear, to break it apart, to really break apart what you're listening to, so you kind of can remix what you're listening to. So you kind of jumped the gun in step 1 already, and you already mentioned some of the things that you want to do with your piece, right? So you said, let's say for texture, right? Texture, you said something like arpeggiated bass lines, right? Now, maybe we can be a little bit more specific here and say, in the A phrase, do you want to still have those arpeggiated bass lines? And we can write that as a note under texture.
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe the arpeggiations, because it gives that kind of lush, slow kind of feel, and then perhaps in the B to contrast, maybe more kind of chord. Maybe it could be like a halftime. So if the first one is kind of dun dun dun, and then the next one is a bit more jumpy, perhaps.
Sure. Yeah. And I would write all these notes down too. And so for the under each section, for that A section, you'd write down this arpeggiated pattern. And maybe you can actually pick a specific pattern and apply that note under melody or counter melody, wherever you feel that it fits the best, right? And I noticed you already you sort of jumped the gun and you picked a harmony also.
Oh, sorry, I'm doing everything wrong today. No,
no, actually, you're doing better than I expected, which is awesome.
Thank you.
So I love that you're coming up with these ideas. If you're teaching a student, and this is what I'm hoping that you as a teacher, as a performer, could do. If you're a student, you probably won't be able to come up with things so easily, right?
No, definitely not.
And so that's your job as the teacher, to help your student get all of these details, to write down the specifics. What key do you like? I like the key of E flat major. Let's write that under harmony section. I listened to a contemporary pop piece that went from the 1 chord to the 5 chord. In the B section, it went to the 5 chord, right? And so you took notes on the things that you liked. If the student can easily recognize what they like, but sometimes they just don't know what to call it. So that's your job to kind of help them with that, right? So they said, well, it did this thing. I liked. I don't know what happened there, but something really interesting happened. at this exact spot in the recording. Can you tell me what happened that was really interesting there? Oh yeah, it switched for the 5 chord here. Let's write that down in your notes and make sure we do that on the B section.
Yeah, and so that's where the connection between your step 3 and 4 works, or 2, 3, and 4, in fact, where you're researching. So listening to things that the student likes, or playing through a previous piece that they've played that they like, or something like that, and making those connections. Well, what does happen here? Because I love doing this with students, pulling apart when they bring in a song and they say, I really love this song. I love pulling it apart and going, well, let's work out why. Because I do this myself. I hear a cool track online on the radio, whatever it is. Who listens to the radio anymore? On Spotify. And I'll go to the piano, work out the chords, and work out why is that so cool? And I went through that in one of my YouTube videos on a song called Sink the Lighthouse by Above and Beyond, which is this epic, it's in E flat minor, and it moves through these incredible progression that keeps the E flat in every single chord as a common tone. I'm like, it's so rich for me. I really love it. And that's when I go to the piano and work out, why does this work so well, and can I use it myself? So this is a great step, and doing this with students, although on a much more basic and simpler level, I think is really a great idea. We'll put a link to that YouTube video in the show notes for today if anyone wants to check it out.
That would be really cool. And yeah, that B flat minor piece, I would absolutely steal that idea. I mean, borrow that idea. And so,
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But then, you know what the thing is, on that same note, if you take that idea, right, and you just change one of the other elements, right, okay, so that starts off with, I think what I heard was this. Oh, you said B flat minor?
No, E flat it was actually.
Oh, E flat. Okay.
Yeah. It's like E flat 5 in the right hand, so E flat, B flat, E flat. And then the left hand would move around. Yeah, it's cool.
Okay, so we did something like this, right? And then up to here. Right?
Nice.
That's kind of what you're saying.
Yeah.
Now that
beautiful.
sounds really close to what you did before, but if we just change one of the other elements and we write a note to ourselves, well, you know what? Let's change the rhythm of it, right? And you know what? Let's change another element too. We'll change the octave placement. That'll be under kind of texture, I think, again, right?
Yeah.
Right? And all of a sudden, you've got a new piece.
Yeah, I see. Now, this is an approach that I think a lot of listeners could really hang their hat on, because, again, it takes something known and just adjusts it without sort of starting with a blank slate, because that's the hardest thing when a teacher is working with a student on improvising, is starting from scratch. So this is almost another approach to the framework, would be to say, okay, let's actually start with something that we know and let's pull it apart and put it back together by changing these elements of music.
Right. Okay, so let's get back to the piece that we're writing, right? So we have an A section, B section, A section, B prime section. We kind of talked a little bit about those music elements, right? And is there anything else that you want to add about that? I know we got a good idea of what our sort of, you could say, accompaniment pattern is going to do. We sort of talked about some of the harmonies. We talked about the texture of it. Do we want to talk about melody at all?
Yeah, we haven't talked about melody. So how do we go about that? How do you create melodies?
I would say that's kind of a conversation for another podcast. But, but you know, I guess you could start by saying that in this particular style, the melody would probably sound pretty conjunct, and a lot of melodies like to move mostly by steps and occasionally by leaps when you want it to sound a little bit more climactic. Unless you're, I don't know, Stravinsky or something, right? And you.
So if we've kind of got, this is our, or something, as A, by conjunct you mean to work in the key harmonically?
I'm talking, so more specifically about the melody, right? Actually, you had the melody, what would you consider to be the melody in there? I mean, the bass was melodic, and then the top note, in a way, was also kind of melodic too. That repeated note, it was memorable, right? We remembered that top. You mentioned to me you thought that something, yeah. And so it's interesting. Sometimes doing the opposite of what I say, like, is a better idea. some of my students come up with like the best ideas, and after they do it, I'm like, why didn't I think of that? And so,
Yeah.
and so that repeated note really was interesting in contrast to the rest of the piece, and it fits, and it really fits what you were saying, right? Which is the how do we want that first section to feel? We want it to be a little bit more calming, soothe, right?
Yeah, kind of flowing. Yeah.
And so for the B section, maybe the melody is the part that we can change, that we can start to ruffle up a little bit. As you said, we wanted to make it a little bit more.
So maybe the melody becomes a little bit more, maybe more active or something. Yeah.
Yeah. And something else you did was you brought it up, you brought the range of it up a little bit, right? And so I guess generally your melody is going to be a lot like, please don't quote me on this, but it's going to be, it's not like I'm on a recording podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But a melody's it should be singable. It should be singable. And so if you can sing it, probably means it's a pretty good melody. And generally speaking, when you sing, if you sing higher notes, you're probably also going to sing them a little bit louder. Higher notes tend to be a little bit more impactful, right? So especially in a style like this, if you lead up to a higher note that might be climactic, you want to have a climactic point in the melody. It's really vague in general, I know, but because sometimes melodies can have a low climactic point. Sometimes the rhythm of the melody can make it more climactic. I'm not sure if you want me to share more about this. Like I said, I could go on for an entire episode about melodies.
No, I mean, I think the point is that, I mean, yeah, there's lots more to say about this. We're giving a really basic framework, and it is a generalization. But that's great because we need a place to start. And so I hope that teachers who are listening are doing this along with me. Chris gave me this whole E flat thing. I just kind of started playing an E flat. I don't really know why. So we've prepared nothing. So and I want you to do the same thing as you listen to this. So pause and go away and work out what you would like to do. What is your favorite key? Or is there a song that you can base this on for yourself? And I think if you do this for yourself, then you've got a better opportunity to do this with a student.
Mm-hmm. So I think what might be a good idea at this point, because you're so good at it, and if you're working with your students, I probably would spend more time really coming up with every single detail on every element just to get a real clear image of what you want. But since you are obviously so comfortable with this,
This is Julie from Julie Duda Music Studio. If you follow me on Facebook or Instagram, you know that my studio loves to have fun, both off the bench and on the bench. I am excited to join Top Music Marketplace to share my students' favorite resources with top music teachers like you. At Julie Duda Music, you will find a variety of games, practice challenges, stickers, photo props, and much more to make lessons in your studio the most anticipated activity of the week for your students. Do your students need to review note values? Then stir up a batch of tacos for Taco Tuesday rhythms, or flex your muscles with lifting musical weights. Note reading is fun when you're matching musical llamas or those music notes are tennis balls on the staff. And what student would not be motivated by receiving a pianiversary card in the mail? I invite you to go over to Julie Duda Music on Top Music Marketplace, where you might be surprised at what fun new game or resource you will find for your students today.
Let's move on to step 4 now.
Okay.
And so step 4 is to sketch. And so I'm going to go back to my idea of the comparison of the drawing. When I was a kid, I used to do a lot of pencil drawings. And before I actually, the first thing I would do was I would sketch a real rough outline of what it was going to look like. And it didn't look anything like the final product. So if I was, drawing a face, all you'd see was like a big oval that looked really weird, almost like a scene from The Ring, if you've seen that movie.
Yes. Is that the one where she comes out of the well? Is that the one, or through the television?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the movie where they start like doing crazy drawings, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so it translates to this because it's okay. What's most important here is you need to play from the piece from beginning to end, no matter what. No matter what, you have to play.
Whoa, that's hard.
And so if it sounds awful, that's okay. It's more about the texture of it. It's more about the feeling of it, right? And so something that you can pay attention to perhaps on this step is the way that you're feeling. And so something I've been telling a lot of my students recently is phrasing tends to act upon the feelings of boringness and familiarity. And so when you feel like you want to repeat things, people like repetition. And so that's the familiarity, right? You repeat, repeat, repeat. But eventually, what you're playing is going to get boring. And so when it gets boring, that's when you start to change things, alter it. That's a sign to be like, oh, I got to move on. But so after you play this new part for a while, guess what? You're going to miss that first part, right? So you got to go back to it. That's why we have this form A, B prime. And so I'm going to do you a favor, and I'm going to make a fool of myself first so that you sound awesome.
You might steal all my ideas.
Okay, how about this? I won't do your piece. I'll base it on something totally separate, right?
Okay, all right, cool. Deal.
So let's say I'm writing a piece about, give me a storybook character. I don't know, something.
How about a topic? Like
a topic, sure.
What about basketball?
So basketball. Here's my improvised piece about basketball. And I'll do somewhat of a similar form. I think I'll do AABA. I like that one.
Okay. This is truly putting a composer on the spot.
Yep. And I'm telling you, I'm purposefully going to make this sound awful. So don't be surprised.
No, you can't say that.
No. Because I'll show you how I can shape it up in the next step. So here's basketball. And there's my piece about basketball.
I like it. I like it a lot. I think you got the shot in at the end. Is that right?
I did get exactly. Yeah. I got the shot in at the end. Thank you. So every other time I missed. That's all I was going to say.
Right. Yeah. So and this is we haven't talked about storytelling in composition as much yet, but that is another approach, certainly for young children, because I use that with my kids. You know, the story of the ant and the elephant, and it's because they can visualize that. Not only on the keyboard, but in their head and the story.
Stories work amazingly with form. So, like I said, with the AABA, I missed the first time. I tried again, missed. Second time, maybe I thought a little bit harder. Or no, I remember what I did in there. So on the spot, I just kept shooting faster and faster without thinking.
Got it.
Right, and then the last part, I took a little more time to think about my shot, right? I took some time to aim and I made it. So it's awesome to do storytelling with your kid. I think I heard another podcast where you did something like that, but based on like movies or something. You did some kind of tracks.
Yeah. I think it was with Lindell Kennedy. Yeah,
that was the one.
She's got movie scores for children to create the music for the visuals. It's fantastic.
Mm-hmm. All right. Your turn.
Oh, great. Okay. Right. So I'm not going to think story in this. I'm just going to think about the sections. I've got some notes here, and trying to do a bit of a contrast between the A and the B.
Mm-hmm.
Does that sound fair?
Yeah. And whatever happens, don't stop. Even if you play something that sounds not anything near what you wanted.
Okay. All right. This is truly putting me on the spot.
Yeah.
Ta-da.
Awesome.
I don't think, as I was playing it, the form wasn't working for me because I didn't want to quite go back to the A and then the B again. So I was thinking more an A, B, A would have suited me better with a contrast in the middle and coming back to that main theme.
And the only way that you're going to come to that conclusion is if you play through the whole piece, like I'm saying. So
that pressure to not stop is quite hard, I have to say. To not stop and fix things or think about things, just to go start to finish. And you do that with your students.
Yes. And so with my I do that with my students. And when I do that with my students, it's a little hard to do over Zoom because of the delay. But when I do this with my students, I do guide them as they're playing. I sort of feed the ideas into them while they're playing. And then I also will there's a couple things you can do before that, which I didn't do for you because you're so talented. And so you can play it through yourself. Play it through yourself. Give them a really good example of what it might sound like from beginning to end. You can record that. You can record yourself playing and send them home with that recording to try and mess with it themselves and go from beginning to end so they don't feel on the spot pressure to get from beginning to end.
Yeah.
And like I said, you can guide them through. You can talk at them while they're playing, reminding them about what they chose to do with that research section.
Yeah, I think modeling is super helpful.
Oh, yeah.
And even if they kind of take your model and almost copy it, I think that's okay because it's kind of what you're doing if you take a really good song that you like and manipulate it and change it a bit.
You know, I said in one of my workshops once, I said something along the lines of when you teach composition, a lot of the times you're going to be doing a majority of the work, but the student gets all the credit. So,
True. So that's good. So how did I do? I mean, it's kind of what we said. There was the contrast, and I felt that we had the mellowness and then the boppiness. So yeah.
I thought you did an awesome job. And I think that we're ready to move on to step 5, which is to shape. And so in the shaping section, you take what you did and just like you did with the form, you self-assess, you record it, you say, hey, you know what? These are some things that I liked and these are some things that I didn't like. And here's some things in some sections that I'd like to add. And in this section, you practice what you played because the more that you practice it, the more that you're going to realize what you'd like to change in particular. And so I'm sure as you played that just now, you probably played some things that you really liked in particular. Do you want to play some of those ideas for me that you latched onto?
Yeah, I did like the opening, this, and I did it was just a little introduction, and now it kind of starts here. And that moving up with the left hand, it's only sort of 4 chords, but it works. So I like that theme.
And you liked the intro or you didn't like the intro? I forgot.
No, I did.
couldn't quite...
I did. It was just like it was 2 bars or whatever it was, just to set the scene.
It's funny because we didn't even talk about that in our forum. So you could have added that on the spot. That's awesome. And so if you want, now also on top of that, I noticed as you played that, it got a little clearer this time. Is there anything that you'd like to change about that?
I wasn't sure about the chord choice. So the first time I did it, you would have noticed probably that I kept the E flat major chord in my right hand. And then I went, I'm not really sure about that. So I went to an F. So I'm kind of making the left hand match the right hand. Right. And then I made the right hand match again. But I think that's a bit boring. I think I would experiment with, is there other chords I can use in the right hand while the left hand moves? That's probably where I'd go next.
Good, yeah, and with the harmony. And I should make a quick note about when you're editing the harmony, sometimes a good harmony is just a half step away from what you want, or at least one of the notes. So if you play that, right? And then you played, maybe instead of this, you wanted to, let's experiment with that second chord. Oh, that's kind of a cool chord. Oh, that was just a half step off from the top note. So,
oh yeah, I see what it is.
But of course, that's not the only solution, right?
So there's many, isn't there?
Mm-hmm. And so like I said, that's one of the things is you go back to step 3, I guess, for a second and tweak some of those musical elements that you think you'd like to change. And like you said, you could also tweak the form. So if you feel like you're bored of an idea, like I said before, you can get rid of it. And if you think you have an extra section, get rid of it. It's fine to balance it like that. So I hope that this is kind of nicely wraps up my 5-step compositional process. Do you have any more questions about it? Anything else I could clarify?
Yeah, I mean, wow, it is always great to have a bit of a step-by-step process. I think we need to create a handout or something for this, Chris. Do you in fact have these from the workshops that you've done that we could share potentially?
No, actually, but I could whip one up for you.
We should definitely whip one up, because I'm thinking, the layout of when you were telling me at first. I'll show you my notes because they're a little bit, and people in the membership can watch the video. Because I started writing the form up here, and then I wrote it vertically down here, and then you wanted me to put the elements of music into the form, which I didn't really have room for. So to create a one-page sort of thing where people could fill in the blanks almost, I think that'd make things really useful.
That would be great, actually. Yeah, I'll come up with a template for that and send it to you.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, that'd be really, really good to share. I enjoyed that process. I think it'd be much harder for children and teachers working with their own students, but I did value doing this myself. So I want to challenge the teachers listening to go back through this episode in front of a piano with a notebook and do what I just did and see what happens. Because actually, I think there's potential here. I've actually not published any music, but maybe something in here. Although I was thinking as I was playing, and then I wanted to go. I can hear something in my head. Oh, there it is. To A flat. But this is a tune. This is something else.
Is it? I don't recognize it.
You don't? Maybe I've written it before in my dreams.
Well, and that's the thing. So this process is designed to get you to that point where it's like, oh, well, maybe I can do this, right? And so maybe it gets you started enough to where you can start to think about those details. And so, to your point before, the last workshop I gave was about using this process for little kids. And like you said, the story is really helpful for those little kids. And also, the more that you help them, the better. And so it's kind of your ideas when you're helping kids. For the most part, you'd be surprised at how much these little kids can come up with by themselves. And younger children actually, a lot of times, have less inhibitions about it. They don't care if they make a mistake. They'll jump into it.
Yeah, that's true. That's a great segue to the comment I was going to make, which was, as adults, we need to give ourselves a break and realize that the first thing we do in this, when we use Chris's framework, is not going to, as you said, permission to be awful and make it sound terrible. That's okay. And the first music you composed, I'm sure you look back on and cringe, as we all do with the first time we do things. So be kind to yourselves. If you're doing this, I've played chords and done a lot of chord progression work all my life, which is why I'm comfortable with that. If you're less comfortable with that, then you may not create what I was able to do on the spot the first time. That's okay. Take it easy, baby steps.
That's where step 3 with research becomes a little bit more important, where your ears become really important, where you have to take a little bit more notes.
So that's great. I really enjoyed that. Thank you very much for sharing that with us, Christopher.
Yeah.
And I would love to just finish with a quick question, firstly about notation as well. What's your take on this? When students have created something, I wouldn't want to have notated your basketball work, by the way. What's your approach with notation? How important is that for you with your students? Do you get them to do that?
It kind of depends. If they have a reason to notate their pieces, then definitely. Like some of my older students in particular, if they want to sell their music, for example, then notation's a really great way to do that. I mean, they also could just record it and sell it on, iTunes or something, that too.
Or just put it up on YouTube or SoundCloud or something.
I mean, it's a good way, if they can, it's a good way to integrate it with theory also. And so with their listening skills. Although I will say a lot of times my students will compose something that is way above their reading level. And so it's a little hard to get them to do that sometimes.
Mm.
If they are in that situation and they do want it notated, I'll just do it for them.
Right. Yep. Because I think there's huge things to be learnt by students notating things, even at an early age, even if it's something like that, because it will help their reading for sure. And I actually found the other day some of the notation that I wrote as a kid when I was first learning piano. It was the cutest thing to find. So yeah, I think there's elements of value in that, but it's also time consuming. So yeah,
Mhm.
I think that's a good way to summarize things. So let's finish off. I would love to hear, you've got a couple of new pieces out through FJH. Can you give us a quick demo or tell us about those?
Yeah. So there's two publications that just came up from FJH that I'm pretty excited about. One is my superpowers book, which I was inspired to write because I'm a huge Marvel nerd fan. And in this book, all of the pieces are kind of like etudes, physical and technical etudes. And
Okay.
so, for example, strength is about playing big chords nice and loud.
Oh, that's my kind of thing.
hmm Speed is about playing fast passages. Teleportation is about moving around the keyboard really quickly.
Mm.
And I've got a lot like this in that book. The other piece, it's kind of a piece, sort of a collection. It's a suite, and it's called My Pet T-Rex, and it's going to be the first out of a few video game suites. And so these pieces are going to be based on video game concepts. This one is based on, I don't know if you've ever heard of Tamagotchi or
Yeah.
Neopets or anything
Yeah, I
like that.
have.
Yeah. It's kind of based on that concept that you kind of have to take care of your animal. And it starts with a story. And this is for, it's for younger kids. I forgot exactly. I think it's elementary / late elementary.
Mm-hmm.
And so it starts off with a story. And the story basically is about it's set in the future, and there's a T-Rex that's really hangry, and and it's your job as a chef to feed the T-Rex so it doesn't go on a rampage. In the end, everyone wins, and there's a dinosaur party.
Oh, that's cool. I love the storytelling elements of those. The first book,
Yeah.
which you mentioned, were kind of superhero in the etudes. What kind of levels are they?
That's a early intermediate level. Some other pieces that are coming out that are going to be for later levels. It's a collection of pieces. It's going to be called Rogue Dances. It's going to be pretty fun.
Rogue, Rogue.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
cool.
And so, yeah, it's going to be, there's 3 pieces in there that are in styles that I guess you wouldn't necessarily find on the piano usually. So like EDM.
Oh, that is totally up my street. Electronic
Yeah.
dance music for those people listening and wondering what that means.
Mm-hmm.
That's really cool. So where do people go to find out about those? Are people playing them? Have you got audio people can listen to?
Yeah, for those 2 books in particular, I do. And again, if you go to my website, which is now called oillpianouniverse.com.
So that's OILL
2
piano
L's in there.
universe.com.
If you go to there, it will lead to everything and anything that is related to me and my business. And so there's a YouTube link at the top of the page there. And you can click on that YouTube link and it'll bring you over to my YouTube videos, of course. And 2 of the videos, I should say, are the Superpowers recordings and the My Pet T-Rex recordings.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's so important, I find, as a teacher, looking at new music to watch someone and listen to them being played. So that's great. We'll put the links to Christopher's music and his website in our show notes. Thank you heaps for joining us today. That's been really good fun. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Well, how much fun was that? I hope you enjoyed listening to me struggling and composing as much as I enjoyed doing it with Christopher. He's such a great teacher and his process is really, really effective. So if you'd like to grab that process, then just head to topmusic.co/episode 209, where you can download the music we were working on and also the checklist so that you can try this out yourself in your studio. Next week on the podcast, we've got another return guest. This time it's Daniel Patterson from Grow Your Music Studio. Now, Daniel, if you haven't met him, is a real superstar when it comes to marketing of studios. Now, before you turn off and not listen next week, because this is about growing a music studio, I want you to ask yourself the question about, do you know what marketing really is? And do you know when, where, and why you should be marketing? And I want to just mention that because sometimes when we talk marketing and growing studio numbers and things like that, people who have a one-on-one studio at home and they've got a little waiting list and they're quite happy with their numbers tend to turn off and not listen. But I want to encourage you to listen to next week's episode because the marketing we're talking about is marketing that everybody should be doing all the time. And if it's not to grow your studio and make it bigger, then what you can do with effective marketing is improve the quality of your students and the parents and the families that you work with. And that's something that we all want to do. So make sure you check it out. That's next week. And as always, I'm Tim Topham, and you've been listening to the Topcast from topmusic.co. Can't wait to speak to you again next week. Bye-bye. For more information about this episode and to find out how to enhance your own teaching, visit topmusic.co. You'll find everything you need for your studio, from lesson plans to cheat sheets, quick win teaching ideas, and guides on how to build your teaching business. Plus, you'll be connected to a global community of the world's top music teachers. And when you're ready, join hundreds of other teachers around the world by becoming a Top Music Pro member and get access to all our bonus content and flagship courses. And don't forget to follow topmusic.co on social media and subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to it. That's all for today. We'll see you in the studio.